As is the Blue Jackets' way, they make it interesting, but they do in fact win and finish the prospect tournament strong. We're going to talk about the final game, the whole tournament, and what happens next for some of these guys on today's Locked on Blue Jackets.
You're Locked on Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked on Blue Jackets, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on podcast platforms and over on YouTube. We got hockey to talk about this week, real hockey and everything. The preseason starts on Sunday, but until then, I wanted to finish off talking about the prospect tournament. Obviously, training camp starts on Wednesday. There is, I believe, going to be there's going to be some media coverage or what's the word? A conference. Media availability is the word I want. Man, I'm out of practice. Later today, so hopefully we'll have something fun from that to talk about in tomorrow's episode. But let's talk about the prospect tournament because in true Blue Jacket fashion, they went up 2-0, down 4-3, and then won 5-4 in overtime. Another solid game from Luca Pinelli. You know, I'm not going to talk too much about him, but like that's exactly the tournament that he needed, right? He was excellent, basically from start to finish. You know, all of the guys that I've been talking about all weekend were good, but I wanted to note a couple of things specifically. One of which is Jordan Demay, who dressed for the game. And then felt something wrong in warm-ups. There was a lower body tweak that apparently doesn't require further testing, but they held him out of the game, like, preemptively, I guess, which, like, he had kind of a middling tournament. I thought he had one good game and one bad game, right? But what this kid doesn't need right now is another injury because he's missed a ton of time over the last kind of season and a half. He only played 40, I think he's only played 45 games over the last 2 seasons. And, you know, the last thing he needs is to miss any more time. So, you know, hopefully for his case, or, you know, for him specifically, like that's just genuinely a niggle. They're going to rest him a couple of days, put him on the ice on, you know, maybe not put him on the ice on Wednesday necessarily, but I don't remember when, off the top of my head, when. Usually the first day of camp, no one gets on the ice and there's a lot of like coaches meetings and talking, and I think they all get their like medicals and stuff done. So hopefully nothing too serious there, because I do think, like, again, this guy, and I hesitate to say that he's at the end of his chances, right? Because he's what, 21, 22 years old. He's had one pro season and, you know, 20 games of a pro season, you know, at that. So I don't think that this is, you know, the end of the world for him. I do think that this will not help him get back to, you know, where he wants to be and where the team needs him to be, right? Because you look at his QMJHL record and you're like, right, okay, well, obviously you're not going to get that in the AHL or the NHL, but like we want him to be a prolific scorer at the next level. And if he keeps taking setbacks like this, then he's just going to keep getting lapped by prospects, right? So that's really unfortunate for him. Again, I thought he had a much better game on Saturday than he did on Thursday, so I was looking forward to see if he could build off that for Sunday. Apparently not. Something I do want to note, just in the theme of the Dumais, is in his place they moved Owen Griffin up to that top line, and I thought he kept up with, you know, the quote unquote big boys of Keskinen and Pinelli really quite well. Scored a goal. Beautiful goal, like just incredible pass from Oliver Keskinen and Owen Griffin's like, yeah, no, I'll take this. Don't mind if I do. So, you know, great to see him get that. He got power play one time, obviously that top line time, which I think is a good sign for the future for him. Obviously, he's going to go back to the OHL, go back to Oshawa, and hopefully have a really strong season, because they're not the same player, but if you can get another Luca Pinelli out of Owen Griffin, Like, that to me feels like a lot of fun, right? I don't think he's quite on the level of Pinelli. But when you look at what he did last season, right, he heated up about halfway through the season and then had 29 points in 21 playoff games for Oshawa. Like, yes, Oshawa was a very good team, so, he had a lot of help, but if they can continue to build on him, and again, he's a 5th round pick, undersized, like, extremely un-Don Waddell, like, draft pick, if I'm being honest, but, like, if they can keep building with him what they've done with Pinelli, then you're laughing, right? And, obviously, not every prospect is going to hit, not every prospect is going to make it, but I thought there was some very, very promising signs in Owen Griffin's game. I think, like, honestly, the most promising sign for me was mostly just that he kept up on that top line, right? Because Oiva Keskinen was drafted a few years ago now. I think he's 21, 22. Luca Pinelli's 20. He was drafted a couple of seasons ago. Owen Griffin is, like, 18 years old, just freshly drafted, is, again, kind of undersized, has a lot of things in his game to work on, and still managed to keep up with, the guys that were doing the heavy lifting at the tournament, which is really great to see. Someone else that I wanted to kind of touch on really quickly, Charlie Elick, I thought, had a very solid game. And by solid, I mean mostly he was just physically solid. He did kill a man. Not quite, but like just a huge, huge hit where I was like, oh, okay, there's Elick, right? Because, and I go back and forth on this topic about like physicality in hockey, and I personally would prefer goal scoring to heavy hitting, but the fact of the matter is that's a part of the game, and especially if you're a defenseman, that's a part that, like, if you're not scoring, you should be doing something. And apparently that something is just delivering huge hits. That being said, he did score a goal, scored the game-tying goal with like 2.5 minutes left, I think. So, again, great to see a sign of life from Elick. I kind of, again, am putting him in the same camp as Griffin of, like, still very young, not quite ready. Again, I think I said this in yesterday's bonus episode. If he is doing the same things next tournament and we're still having the same conversations next tournament, that's a problem. But right now I'm like, oh, okay, it's, he's having trouble keeping up with some of the bigger boys on the team, which is absolutely fair. And I think, again, he's going to be a project defenseman. I'm not expecting, any kind of impact from Elick for at least 2 or 3 years, minimum. But I think this tournament really kind of shows you the gap in, and again, to go back to Guillaume Richard, who I thought had an excellent tournament, it shows you the difference in, 4 years of college hockey versus like 2 years of WHL hockey. Give Elick another year, 2 years. I think we're going to see a much, much improved player, but he kind of just seemed, his game felt immature, and I don't mean that in like an emotional way. It just seems very much like he hasn't refined any of his skill. Like, obviously he has lots of things that he's good at, right? And he had a very good year in the WHL 2 years running. Got traded halfway through, went to Tri-City, had an impact there, right? What works in the WHL is not going to work in the AHL, in the NHL, right? And those are the things that he's going to have to refine. And so, like, when I say immature, maybe I just mean young, or, unpolished is maybe a better word. So, he give him some polish, give him another year, see what happens. But I was glad to see him in the game because he's just kind of been unnoticeable for a lot of the tournament. So I thought he had a noticeable game, which is good, right? You want to be noticeable, and for good reasons. You want to be noticeable for good reasons. There's one more guy that I want to talk about. 2 more guys, actually, that I want to talk about in terms of players that were standouts at this tournament and in the final game specifically. And then we're going to talk about some AHL contracts and whether any of these guys are going to leverage this into a pro contract. So we'll do that in just a second here at Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. FanDuel has a bunch of different ways to bet, right? You could do player props. You could just do individual. I think this guy is going to have 3 shots on goal, Or you can do a same game parlay where you're like, well, if this guy scores a goal and this guy scores a goal and this guy scores a goal, then I will add them all together and make $1 bajillion. And you can do either at FanDuel, or you can even like jump in live as the action unfolds and be like, hey, it looks like these guys are trying to mount a comeback. Maybe I'll put $5 on that. All different ways, all extremely valid ways, and all great ways to add a little bit more energy to your game day Sundays. So, are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about a couple more guys that I thought were standouts in the... and when I say standouts, I don't mean like amongst the team, but standouts amongst... I always call them camp invites, and that's not what they are, tournament invites. There's a couple of guys that I thought had really, really strong tournaments. I thought guys that were noticeable. And I thought, let's talk about that, because it's always fun to have guys that surprise you at these tournaments, right? And so I talked a little bit about Nicolas Sima. I think in yesterday's episode, he had, I believe he had 2 goals against the Sabres. He had 2 goals last night against the Penguins. Excuse me. But he, again, I thought for a guy that at first glance I was like, oh, he's just kind of here to throw his weight around and be a pain in the butt. 4 goals in 3 games, I believe, or 3 goals in 3 games, including the overtime game winner last night, which is fun. I say last night, it was night for me, but he's coming off of 4 years in the OHL. It looks like he's going to be going back to Saginaw as an overager, but I wonder if, again, he feels to me like a guy that is going to get a camp invite and probably not stick around very long, probably one of the first cuts, but might get an invitation to the AHL training camp on top of that. Sima has been a guy that they've brought to these tournaments for a couple of years in a row, which I think is, probably a good sign for him. I think it's showing that the team thinks that there's something there, right? And so I do think it'll probably come down to, what the GM thinks when they sit down to watch the tape. I assume that, the Don Waddell and Dean Everson and all of the player development department were in Buffalo this weekend with the tournament. So they'll have seen it, right? But he's definitely a guy for me that I'm kind of like putting an asterisk by his name if I'm the player development staff, as this guy might be an option for the AHL. Had a very respectable season in the OHL. 35 points in 62 games, including 18 goals. 97 penalty minutes, and that, again, like, that's just kind of Nicolas Sima, right? He does just kind of love to take penalties sometimes, but I think there's a guy there that might be an AHLer, probably a depth AHLer if I'm being honest, but like, with the veteran rules, you can't just fill your bottom 6 with a bunch of old guys, right? You need guys like Nicolas Sima to come in and be an option in the bottom 6, potentially play a little bit further up the lineup. I believe he mostly played bottom 6 in this tournament, but got some power play time. And again, that overtime game winner like clearly had the coach's trust. So there's something to be said for 3 goals in 3 games at a tournament like this for an undrafted player that is just there on a camp invitation. And I think Nicolas Sima really kind of was probably the best of the camp invites, right? Another guy that I want to talk about is Rylan Mosley, who is actually under AHL contract right now. But he, again, was a guy that I thought was extremely noticeable. Like, again, he probably should be noticeable. He's 25 years old, has just last season finished, I believe, 5 years of college, 4.5 technically. So, he, again, is a guy that, should be standing out, right, as just an adult. But he was a point-a-game player at the University of Wisconsin last season, came to the Monsters, played 4 games in the regular season for them, is going to be returning to the Monsters in 25-26. And again, like that to me feels like a what they're going to do with Sima. Probably my guess is he goes back to Saginaw for a season. They sign him at the end of the year, kind of again similar to Max McHugh, Jack Williams. That late season free agent signing for undrafted players, and I feel like Sima's the perfect guy for that. But I really liked Mosley. Didn't put up a ton of points in the tournament, but played in the top 6. I think again got some extended ice time with the lack of Jordan DeMay in that final game with his injury, and I liked his game. I thought he was engaged in the offensive zone. I thought he got some wheels on him. Got some speed on the kid. And yeah, just like he was noticeable in good ways, right? Which again, if you are and not necessarily a camp invite because he is an AHL contracted player, but like clearly a guy that they just kind of brought along to bring along, I feel like. And he didn't disappoint, right? He again, noticeable is what I keep coming back to. Another undersized player, which means that he has to be noticeable to be effective. Or he has to do more to be noticeable, I guess, is what I'm saying here. But I liked his game a lot. Going to be interesting to watch him in the AHL. I don't know if there's an AHL player there, but when you look at his NCAA scoring. Yes, the University of Wisconsin is not like amongst the upper echelon of college teams, but being a point-a-game player in the Big Ten, I think is very impressive. And he's improved, every year since joining the NCAA. Like he had 13 points in his first full season, 13 and 36 to go all the way up to 37 and 37. So like we've seen what's the word I want? Progression. So hopefully he could be I don't know that he's going to be like a huge impact player for the AHL this season, but again, because the Blue Jackets and the Monsters lost so many players at the AHL level, they need guys like Mosley to step up. And I think he used this tournament as a hey, look at me type thing of, again, it helps that the Monsters coach is coaching, right? It's a really good way to get noticed if your boss is standing on the bench watching you. So I think a really, really good tournament from Mosley. And I think that's it for guys that are... Oh, no, I want to talk about one more guy. We'll take one more quick break, and then there's one more guy that I want to talk about. And so we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I've got to tell you about Indeed. Because I don't know about you, but have you ever realized that your business needed to hire someone yesterday and there's just no one there? You can find amazing candidates fast if you just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored job post puts your post at the top of the page and helps you reach the right candidates faster. I have been unlucky enough to have to job hunt in the past, and Indeed is the place that I always went. I thought it was the best site. I thought the jobs were better there. And I'm clicking on that job right at the top of the page because that's where the sponsored jobs are. And that the sponsored jobs are going to be better than the regular jobs. They make sure that your post is seen by the right candidates right now. You can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions do apply. Hiring, Indeed is all you need. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets, and let's talk about Tyler Peddle, who I thought had a reasonably good game against the Sabres, drew a penalty and then scored on the delayed power play, or the delayed penalty, I guess, is the phrase for it. And again, I thought he was noticeable for the Penguins as well, or against the Penguins, I should say. Now, was he acting up because his brother was on the other side? Possibly. The Brady Peddle is a Penguins draft pick, but Tyler Peddle, I thought, was a really interesting option to bring to this camp because obviously Blue Jackets draft pick was, I believe, the very last pick in the draft of his draft year, which I want to say was 2022 or 2023. They did not sign him to an ALC. They renounced his rights at the end of the season when his rights ran out. So now he can basically go wherever he wants, but he still ends up at Blue Jackets prospect camp. which I thought was extremely interesting. Now, his dad does work in the organization, if I'm not mistaken, so like that might be part of it. But I do wonder, is this, well, we don't want to give you an NHL ELC, but we'll give you an AHL contract, right? Kind of in the same way that, and I might be wrong here, but I believe that the Blue Jackets did not issue a qualifying offer to Julian Bjorkvik-Holm, or they didn't like retain his rights. Basically, he ended up signing an AHL only deal as opposed to an NHL, a two-way deal with the Blue Jackets and the Monsters, and he's now going to be going back to Cleveland as one of their defensemen. So I do wonder, is there something similar happening here? Like, is there going to be an AHL deal for Pedal? I wouldn't hate it. I didn't watch him a ton in the queue, but I thought he was intriguing, let's say. And again, I still don't know what kind of player is there. It looks like he's going back to the queue for his overage season next season. But he's done 4 years and hasn't put up massive amounts of points, but has put up points. So maybe not this year. Again, similar to Sima potentially. I wonder if there's an AHL contract coming. Bring him back to camp next year. See what happens there. But I wanted to kind of point him out because I do think he was noticeable in some good ways, but I do think that he is an interesting player to be an option for the Monsters somewhere down the line. I liked him a lot in his draft year. I know that there were draft experts, prospect guys that were like, this is a really interesting late pick for the Blue Jackets. Not the most conventional path to the pros for Pedal, presumably, but for a 7th round draft pick, if he turns pro at all, like that to me feels like a victory in drafting. I think people get too into, oh, well, he was a draft pick, so we should make the NHL. Like he had a 3% chance of making the NHL basically at all. Not a huge percentage chance of making the AHL even. So if he makes the AHL, then again, that's I'm not saying he's going to turn to Trey Fix-Polanski all of a sudden, who I think is one of the more effective 7th round picks for the Blue Jackets organization in recent memory, but definitely a guy that I'm not going to put money on him beating the expectations, but I wouldn't be surprised if he did, if that makes sense. But all in all, that first game aside, I thought it was a pretty effective tournament for the Blue Jackets prospects. The camp invites, I thought, held their own for the most part. I'm unsurprised that the first game was a little bit wonky on account of, again, you've got all of these guys that have been here for 5 minutes. We're just going to throw them out there. Defense was still kind of a disaster in the final game. I think Evan Gardner had made 15 saves in the first period, and it went a little bit downhill for him after that. But again, I thought a fairly strong game for him. Made some excellent saves. Obviously, the goal situation is a little bit more solidified for the AHL now with the trade of Ivan Fedotov, and issuing a correction on myself is that yesterday I said that he was exempt from waivers. That's untrue. But the fact that he makes $3.2 million probably is going to dissuade a lot of teams, unless they have, like, knock on wood, a catastrophic goalie injury at their own training camp. My guess is that Fedotov is going to sail through waivers, and they're going to just stick him in Cleveland and leave him there, which is the best place for him, quite frankly. And we'll go from there. But like bringing him in means that you've got him as the starter, hopefully Sorchenko as the backup, and then you can put Nolan Lalonde in the ECHL to continue to develop down there. I thought he was fine at this tournament, but it gives the Blue Jackets a little bit more. This trade, gives the Blue Jackets just a little bit more leeway in terms of where their goalie prospects play. And I think there's less rush now with guys like Gardner. You can stick him in Saskatoon all season and leave him there. You don't have to drag him to the AHL before you want to. Not that I think that we're going to do that anyway, but now they have 5 pro goalies under contract. If you include Lalonde, probably, knock on wood, that should be enough. I wonder if there is another goalie coming. Just again for that injury cover, because again, I still remember a couple of seasons ago when they went through 7 goalies at the NHL level, right? And that was why Jet Greaves ended up signing his ELC, right? But the goalie situation in Cleveland a lot more solidified now, which is good news, and that hopefully no need to rush Gardner any more than they have to, right? So good news there. Again, I like the trade. I talked about it in a little bonus episode yesterday, so I'm not going to like rehash a lot of it, but it's a great no-risk trade, right? Oh no, a 6th round draft pick for a guy that could potentially be an extremely good AHL starter. His NHL numbers weren't sparkling, but his KHL numbers were excellent, so maybe he can finish somewhere in between those two in the AHL. Who knows? That's what I've got for today. Tomorrow, what I think we're going to do is talk about the press conference that the Blue Jackets organization has about training camp, which is starting later today, I believe. I don't know the exact time yet, but I saw that there was going to be a press conference, and we'll talk about anything interesting that comes out of that. And hopefully we'll have a camp roster as well, so we can kind of unpack that a little bit. Thank you for listening, for making it your first listen today every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I am Jay Foster. You can find me on Blue Sky at JAKOBFORSTER. You can find the show at LO_Blue Jackets over on Twitter. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.